Hey, family, welcome. Welcome on in. Ooh. As you know, we're still going over this book, Intuitionist, and we're going to be actually going on into Mansa Musa. We're going to talk a little bit about Mansa Musa and maybe get into reading a few pages of this story. But first, I'm going to only read a couple pages out of that today. But first, I wanted to recap and go over some things that we went through in this story. So, in part one, we met Lily Mae Watson, who is the first Black woman inspector. And this takes place in New York City, an alternate version of the mid-century New York City, of course. In this reality, there is a pervasive and cult-like fascination with elevators. As you know, this book takes us into the whole world of elevator inspections and stuff like that. So we definitely go into an alternate world, uh, and we learn a lot from this world of elevator inspectors. It is greatly highlighted in this story. Um, the reason why is they enable the construction of skyscrapers in the modern city by extension. Elevator inspectors occupy a special place in society, for it is their stamp of approval that signifies whether an elevator is safe or not. Lily Mae is the city's she's the second Black elevator inspector, but of course, she's the first Black woman. There are two competing schools of thought in this story within the elevator inspection world. Most of the inspectors are imperious who take a traditional approach to inspection, examining cable wires and measuring response times. It's kind of like the world of architecture as well. You know, that's an ancient. Um, we have our ancient methods, and then we have the modern day how we're taught, which is quite a little bit different. Lily Mae are intuitionists who feel and visualize an elevator's vibration to determine its safety for reasons no one can explain. Intuitionists have a slightly better safety record than the empirics. So the two schools of thoughts in this story that we deal with is imperialist and the intuitionist. As Lily Mae waits to inspect an elevator at 125 Walker, the superintendent finally arrives. He makes little effort to hide his dissatisfaction that a Black woman is inspecting his building elevator. After riding the elevator and visualizing its vibrations and complex geometric shapes, Lily Mae determines that she must cite the building for a faulty overspeed governor. Okay. Okay. So that was in chapter 1. Now we're going to look at in part 2, Ben Urich Ben Urich is a reporter for Lift magazine, a trade journal devoted to the elevator industry. like Lever, he received torn out pages from Fulton's journal in the mail, and he has written a story on the Intuitionist based black box that is set to run in a couple of days, late at night. Urich goes to the office to pick up an advance copy of the new issue, but is shocked to see that his story has been killed. As he tries to call his editor on payphone, Jim and John, who say they are Johnny's shush men, grab him and throw him into the back seat of their car. They tell him to back off the black box story and proceed to break each of his fingers. Meanwhile, one of Lever's chauffeurs drives Lily Mae to the Institute for Vertical Transport grounds to meet Mrs. Marie Claire Rogers, Fulton's former maid and caretaker. She looked after Fulton after the Institute's board of directors pressured him to resign as dean. Following a period marked by what they deemed to be eccentric behavior in his will, Fulton stipulated that Mrs. Rogers could stay in his on-campus home for as long as she likes. Evidence which suggests to Lily Mae that the two were lovers. So that's where we left off pretty much at that part. And I wanted to also look at, since we've been into this story, some themes and some symbols and motifs. Okay, the promise and pearls of racial uplift. Racial uplift is a principle that calls on the wealthiest and most educated Black Americans to lift up their race. The term was popularized around the turn of the century by Black intellectuals like W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington in his 1903 essay, The Talented Tenth, which refers to an economic and political leadership class among African Americans. Du Bois wrote, the Negro race, like all races, is going to be saved by its exceptional men. That's a fact. As well, but they didn't know then, it would be men and women, are exceptional men and women who is going to be the ones to lift up and take us out of this place that we're in now as Black people. The problem of education then among Negroids must first of all deal with the talented tenth. Du Bois, W.E.B., the talented tenth. The Negro Problem, New York's J. Potts and Company, 1903. Over the years, the concept of racial uplift as an effective vehicle for achieving equal rights has come under increased scrutiny, including by Du Bois himself, who observed in frustration that many Black leaders never returned to their communities after achieving professional success. And this is true. We see it in today's society and everything that we go through. And more modern critiques point out that racial uplift fails to address the institutionalized nature of system racism. Hold on, family. I'll be back. Hey, Music Land, welcome. I'll be back. I'm going to pause there for a second. I'm back. Okay. So It fails to address the institutionalized nature of systematic racism, with the University of Maryland professor Christopher H. Foreman. Of course, then they even knew that the society around us was making it seem like it's better, pulling Black people to want to be more the other side than themselves. Of course, that's what giving you Christianity was about, because it's not about the the God in the book, because that God in the book is not going to give you salvation. That God in the book is not going to help you find what you need. He's not going to help you. He already stated that in the book. He's a liar. Um, the book is trying to tell you that it's you. It is you. Once I get the understanding of everything that's going on in that book, it's basically telling you about you, the individual who's reading that book. You can't just, you can listen to the stories and fall, read all the stories. I fell in love with the stories, to be honest with you, when I was younger. But the whole thing is, it comes down to it's you. If you don't want the empowerment, something evil is gonna, wicked is gonna take that empowerment that you throw to the wayside and use it against you and over you. So that's what I get from the Bible. So if you want to go on thinking that there's a God that loves you, a God that made you, it's nature within the story that's telling you, science and nature within the story that's telling you, you got to hold your own. If you don't hold your own, someone's going to hold it for you. If you want to lean on the what they say, lean on Jesus, or lean on, because even Jesus, as we know, it was a man per se, and he got hung on a piece of wood, and he asked for help. He asked for help, and no one came. No help happened. And then he said, "Why have you forsaken me, Father? Why have you not come to my rescue?" You know that, and that story alone tells me that it was him. It was up to him. He had the power all along. He refused to use his powers, which was, you know, he refused to do it. He, maybe his pride, it sounds like a pride, or um, what they call it, your ego. Ego got in the way of him relying on himself, because he told the stories about something outside of himself saving him, giving him the power. But it wasn't the power given to him by anything outside of him. It was the power within him that he was born with to save his people through knowledge, not of knowledge of any God outside themselves, but of themselves, of how he was. He had that righteous flow within him. It was always within him, but he thought, projected it like it was something outside of him. And something outside of you will always try to rule, control, and destroy you. It's what's within you. So, like I'm saying, we have to empower ourselves individually, as individuals, and as a whole. The successive strategies embraced by the champions of racial uplift have all encountered their practical and political limits. For the most part, these strategies have not so much failed as fallen victims to the inevitable exhaustion. Now let's look right quick at some of the symbols and motifs. Okay. Central to Whitehead's allegory surrounding racial uplift is the symbol of the elevator, an elevation more broadly. At its most basic level, the elevator symbolizes 20th century modernity. Yes, because Prince used the elevator in his song. I actually want to play that part of it. I'm sure he probably read the story. Here we go.
Electric word like the beats forever, and that's a mighty long time. But I'm here to tell you, there's something else. The afterword. So when you call up that trick, you never hear. You know the one who wants to tell you you'll be alright. This life, things in my heart, the afterword. This life, yo. It's the elevator trying to break you down. You're crazy. Yo. It's the elevator trying to break you down. You're crazy.
Yes. He said, if the elevator tries to break you down, go crazy. So let's finish. He utilizes the elevator. The elevator and the elevation more broadly at its most basic level, the elevator symbolizes 20th century modernity as the invention made the growth of densely populated, vertically rising cities possible. By extension, the elevator also offers some measure of racial uplift. It is vertical cities like the book's setting, modeled after mid-century New York, where Black Americans like Lily Mae and Pompeii are afforded far greater opportunities than in the small southern towns where they grew up. This racial uplift is also illusory. The book's setting is perhaps the only place in the country where Lily Mae could obtain a job as a Black female elevator inspector. She also faces daily indignities from white colleagues and strangers alike, and her bosses largely view her as a token, a gesture to an increasingly diverse and progressive constituency. Yeah, that's kind of like when I was in the military and I was told by one of my other coworkers, and he was not Black. He said the only reason why you're here is for um, uh, sorry about that, family. He said the only reason why you're here, I hope y'all can hear me well. I hope you can hear me well. He said the only reason why you're here is, for the amount of number of Black females they needed. I forgot what they call it. I always forget it because it's important to me. Um, I really think we got set up in this society, in a place where our people thought that they can change things, but you can't change. You can only change things with within your group, within yourself, with like minds. We are all like minds, right? Like people, because we have been forced into that. Um, some of us have identity issues and go against the like-mindedness that we all have, and that's to be expected in a society of where one is pit against, like, one is made to be the better looking race of people versus our race of people. So that's to be expected. So they say that a lot of times majority of us black people are in our jobs only to meet government regulations on hiring so many black people. Then you're so many black women, so many black men they gotta have, all of that. We have to live with that. We have to live with that. And people fought for us to live in this, within this. And it's a weak, it was a weak move, I have to say, because it's easier to go and live under someone that is and then try to fight for everything that they have. But it's harder for us to, it was harder at the time for us to really build and do on our own, because these people kept sabotaging the elevator. They kept sabotaging our elevator, just like in the story with Lily Mae. We know her elevator was sabotaged. So, and she knows it. And her bosses largely, like I said, they view her as a token, a gesture to an increasingly diverse and progressive constituency. Lily Mae's unique position and the allegory of racial uplift are both embodied by the Fannie Briggs elevator stack, which Lily Mae is assigned to inspect, named for an enslaved woman who taught herself to read and escaped to the north. The elevator should be a powerful symbol for Black progress. So, the point that our people were able to teach themselves how to read would show you that in our race of people, there's no such thing as illiteracy. There's only just the lack of interest in it, or the lack of motivation to learn. But we do have the ability to teach self-teach ourselves a lot of a wide range of things. So I don't know why we even utilize colleges anymore, but I think the reason why we have to, a lot of times, like for what I went into for school, you have to be certified, but in certain things, like you have to be, you have to take this test, you have to go through the, well, we got our own society now, but you would have to go through um, work for someone, get qualified, and get signed off and stuff like that, to really work on your own in your own business. And so a lot of certification is required in this society that we live in. Uh, and that's why our own records should have been, would have been more important for us to have, and more beneficial for us to have passed down to us. But like I said, they stopped that elevator and cut the wires, the electricity on the elevator, and stopped it from going up where it needed to go. So it's up to us to fix it, make it better. Okay. So where did I stop at? I stopped there. Okay. Lily Mae reclines on the bed, drawing plans for war. After their talk, Mr. Reed excused himself to attend to pressing business related or not related to the matter concerning Lily May. She doesn't know and left her to the garden. A slow hour passed, distracted by intermittent drops of moisture from above, as if the sky were conducting a feasibility study on the implication of rain, of committing to a course of action. Lily May left the garden and resumed her scheming in her room. At 8 o'clock, Mrs. Gravely served her a dinner of no small culinary accomplishment. Mrs. Gravely was not as Lily May imagined. She was a small, energetic woman whose gray hair coiled tightly on her head like a knob. She smiled politely as she placed the tray across Lily May's knees and even paused. Before departing to a beat, fluff into the pillows. She didn't say anything as Lily May ate, slowly as her mother had taught her. She wondered why the handsome man from the morning had not brought it to her. She recognizes his knock a few hours later. Light, regularly spaced, forceful. Her day's worth of plans recede, and Lily May sits up in the bed, tells him to come in. I just come up to see if you needed anything. Natchez says his thumb is locked into the corner of his pocket, his fingers splayed across a hip. No, thank you, Lily May responds. Then, thinking better, adds, You're on all night. I mean, you sleep here. He shakes his head, amused. No, ma'am, he says. I'm off in a few minutes. I just wanted to see if you needed anything before I leave. Mrs. Gravely's asleep, so you're on your own once I'm gone. I'm fine. Thank you again. His body tilts to leave, but Lily May stops him with, Is that where you're from, Natchez? That's where my mama's from, he replies. He leans against the door. She didn't like it enough to stay there, but she liked it enough to name me after it. She still wants to hear people say it. I'm from down south too. Where? A dirty town. You're not much for talking, are you? I talk. Natchez shakes his head again and grins. Okay then, he says. You one of those visiting professors they always have staying here. You giving a speech. No, I'm an elevator inspector. Lily May's voice automatically rises at those last two words, up to the tone she uses when she's on a case. I didn't know they let us do that, Natchez tells her, even up here. They don't, but I'm doing it anyway. Is that good work, working on elevators? That's a city job, right? It's not bad, Lily May says, stealing a quick look at his hands. His fingers are wide, arrogant, they seem to her. They go up and down, and they go down. You just have to understand why they do that. Okay, speaking of that, also, let me talk about how he has the chapters in this book. He has two chapter ones, part one, and two part twos. The first two are up, or no, the first two are down. The first two chapters, what I'm reading now, is down. And of course, the other two are up. The one and two, the last one and two was up. Because I start losing my space. Okay. We already read that. Neches doesn't mind. I'll see you tomorrow then, he says. My uncle, he's sick. He's still sick. What's wrong with him? He says he can't feel his leg. Neches frowns. He says it feels like it's been cut off. That's terrible. It happens to him from time to time. Thanks for checking in on me. You sleep tight, Lily Mae. Sleep tight. The children masticate rock candy in greasy teeth and wait for their saliva to thicken into sugar. In the heat, everything is sticky. Their tongues are green and red from the candy. At the exhibition of industry of all nations, the flags from every civilized country dangle in the limp air like the rags of stable hands. The sun stokes gleams on the monstrous edifice of the Crystal Palace, which is a replica of its namesake in London. Iron and wood and glass redoubt ribs, strengthened by slender cross ribs, a royal bauble. Before they invented verticality, that was all there was to inspire to. Glass and steel confection delivered by spyglass from overseas. To the west of the Crystal Palace is the Fatigued Croton Reservoir. East is Sixth Avenue, a gargoyle of carriages and hooves. The Crystal Palace will fall 5 years later in 1858, devoured by fire in 15 minutes, and become Times Square in due course. But today, 1,000 windows snare the light, and the glass is streaked with the brackish film of condensed sweat. It is greenhouse, and what treasures bloom there. And the room is arrayed raw materials on velvet. Behind glass, minerals, ores in all shapes coil, copper, stone, marble, crystal, diverse wonders all. In one gallery, a locomotive squats on iron hunches atop a black pedestal. The machine is this dynamic age distilled these vehicle molecular times. They come from all over the world. Hamburg presents many articles in horn, some pretty furniture, a large collection of sticks embroideries, and Turkey showcases fine silks, raw materials, stuff of the earth, carpets and rugs, much remarked upon. A million people Under that glass, during the course of exhibition, they dolly and gasp at the exquisite watches from from Switzerland. Very diminutive, true craft, barely an inch in circumference, and wound and ticking audibly, most beautifully set with lovely enameled exteriors, grain and chocolate and guns, muskets and French pistols, the famous duels and stuffed Apache, crimson fruit from Amazon vines, and brown slivers of llama meat, dried and cured. On the second floor are the reaping machines and threshers, still inelegant, like lithe animals stooping to lick moisture. The Bowie knives weep in the sunlight. They say Americans are never seen without one. A quick look around disproves this continental humbug. A monkey in a sable cape on a leather leash can tell the future. One display features a horse that's only a foot high and two-headed infant in a jar. For the children's delight, the ladies and gentlemen step aside and wave their handkerchiefs in deep respect as he walks by. The Chinese Mandarin and two retainers, newspapers, later report that he was just an opium smuggler pulling a gag. The sound of the organ on the second floor, against which 200 instruments and 600 voices would be nothing. So loud on this first day, July the 14th, 1853, falls away. The heat is even taking its toll on the organ. One man remarks, "No, the organ has ceased because the man with the lungs of a bear, the vice president of the United States, is about to address the assembly." Assembled. Our exhibition cannot fail to soften, if not eradicate altogether, the prejudice and animosities which have so long retarded the happiness of nations. We are living in a period of most wonderful transition, which tends rapidly to accomplish that great end of which all history points, the realization of the unity of mankind. Okay. I'm going to stop right there, and we're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and look at Mansa Musa before it gets too late, so I can go and get this car cleaned. Mansa Musa is the captivating guide to the interior of the Islamic Mali Empire in West Africa and how he developed Timbuktu into a major center for trade. His proud, regal face. Okay, this is the introduction, a golden emperor and golden age. Okay. His proud and regal face stares out at us from old medieval maps, donning a golden crown and holding a golden globe in the palm of his hand. You know what I found out about Mansa Musa and who he was? He was actually the high priest of those Moors who went into Europe. Well, he was he wasn't the high priest of that, um, but of them directly, but he was one, he was the, I would say, the high priest. He was a high priest who, because actually he was the high priest. He was their high priest. Because I was thinking it was much later than that. I was getting my times mixed up. But he was the high priest that had um the some of the black Moors who were two priests, who too were priests, go and work aside and help the European men and help the European woman become more civilized when they went over into Europe. Okay. There is just something very special about the West African monarch named Mansa Musa, who lived during the High Middle Ages. The Catalan Atlas, which features the illustrated image of Mansa Musa, was actually drawn up in 1375, several decades after Mansa Musa had already passed. Okay. So, contrary to its name, the book isn't actually an atlas, as it just contains one map. The fact that Mansa Musa was still remembered all of those years later, remembered enough to put his face on a map, indicates just how stunning a figure Mansa Musa was, really. The Catalan Atlas, composed of by Spanish, more specifically a Majorcan cartographer named Abraham Crescas, was a standard and mainstay for medieval explorers. Crescas had been hired by Prince John of Aragon to create a map of the known world. So, okay, so like I said, Mansa Musa might have been the one who passed down knowledge to the high priest that worked, that had the other priests go out and help the Europeans in Europe during that time. Because this is the Dark Ages time. That was the Dark Ages time, and he was before the Dark Ages time. Mansa Musa was before the Dark Ages. So he was before Europeans went into Europe, and he was before that time. He was before Europeans even got any kind of power or even existed in the capacity they were starting to rise and get existing. The fact that Mansa Musa was still remembered all those years later, remembered enough to put his face on a map, indicates that just how stunning he was, right? This was, of course, over 100 years before the American continents were known. See, they said this was, of course, over 100 years before the American continents were known, excluding the Vikings' jaunt to Canada. So the known world of those days, at least almost among Europeans, primarily consisted of Europe, Asia, and Africa. It was on the portion of the Catalan Atlas that designed West Africa that we find the intriguing illustration of Mansa Musa, who is seated on the throne with a nugget with pure gold in his raised hand. All of the subsequent intrepid explorers who saw the noble visage of Mansa Musa staring back at them as they did their best to use the Catalan atlas to navigate through unknown lands and waters must have wondered just who this great African king was, although there is still much that has yet to be uncovered about Mansa Musa's life. Fortunately, through the piecing together of historical records, Mali, Lore, and archaeological finds, that once puzzling picture has become a little clearer. What was once a puzzling picture has become much clearer now. Mansa Musa ruled from his throne in his capital city of Niani, which literally sat right on top of the gold mine. In those days, Mali is believed to have had some of the largest gold deposits in the world, and Mansa Musa successfully stewardship of these resources, according to modern estimates, most likely made him the richest man who ever lived. You know what? As Black people, nothing is stopping us from having our own monetary system, our own, nothing is stopping us from that. The only thing that will stop you is um, other people's mentality of control. And once you begin to see that their mentality is holding you from achieving what they have achieved by using you, and you can do that on your own, that is beneficial, because one thing I recognize is you can have gold in this society as a Black person, but that's going to be devalued. And working with them, they're going to always devalue it so they can benefit from it. So what we must do is value ourselves and value what they deem to be value and we deem to be value, and that's how we're going to make our own system from that, our own monetary system where we can win and not be out here losing. So, because that's what they did. They took and they devalued. They can devalue anything. If you think that what they value is of utmost importance, and you don't recognize that you can value just as well and benefit in your own, through your own culture, your own community, and oh, hey Vincent, you didn't know what was it, Mansa Musa or the the Tuitionist story? But as I was saying, we can very much do on our own with the gold. Uh, just like they took the whole world and said, we're gonna make this. It was only one puny little man that did that. Then we can have great big men that do it just as well. I mean, you can't just be afraid of a bullet when you're given so much power. So much power. Like when Adam and Eve ate up the apple, God told them that they would die. The serpent said you would become gods. One was hindering them from their own powers because he told them, I made you, I molded you, and now I put you in this cave and I'm going to dangle temptation in front of you. So if you want to live like that, you can stay like that. But if someone's coming along and telling you something that is beneficial to you and letting you know that you would empower yourself, that you don't have to have that thing over you, I would listen to that thing because she did eat the apple. They both ate the apple and it benefited them. It benefited them greatly. So it depends. It's either you allowing positive things, positive people come into your life and encourage you, or you can go with the people who want with that thing that wants to imprison you and hold you and control you and have you in that strict place where you're not really experiencing life like you're supposed to experience life. Using your powers, using your intuition, your discernment, all of these things that you have, the senses you have. Okay. Okay. Mansa Musa's successful stewardship of these resources, because Mali is believed to have had some of the largest gold deposits in the world. And Mansa Musa's successful stewardship of these resources, according to modern estimates, most likely made him the richest man who ever lived. Mansa Musa is, in fact, estimated to have had a net worth that would be very near $400 billion in today's US currency. Just to put that in perspective, the current richest human being on the planet, at least as of this writings, is a man named Elon Musk, has a net worth of $200 billion. But that's all because unknown caller. But that's all because the love of whiteness. All because the love of what we've been given. The Stockholm syndrome and all of that we can see white people as benefiting, as white people as being more valued in our society today. Because Mansa Musa is our great ancestor. And they try, from what I'm hearing, they trying to make him into a white character. Like they tried to always steal our ancestry, our mysteries. They always try to steal everything about us. But if you ain't got it, in the end of the day, if you ain't got it, you ain't got it. If it ain't working, if it ain't there, you ain't got it. If you have to mistreat people to be the richest man in the world and deceive people, and when you know you didn't do this on your own, then you cannot be of those ancestors. You cannot be of that ancestor. You can't be a Mansa Musa. Because a Mansa Musa did not do anything like that. We didn't, and no, we are not a cursed people. A lot of people they begin to think, well, why is this happening to us? No, the reason why these things happen is because we allow it. That's plain and simple. We allow these things to happen to us. We don't live within our powers. We allow people to be powerful around us and over us because somehow mentally, psychologically, that's been a programming to do. It is indeed rather incredible to think that even with all the resources and commercial expertise of the modern world today, our current richest figure is worth only roughly half of what this little known millennium empire Mansa Musa had at his disposal in the Middle Ages. Disposal is perhaps the best word to describe Mansa Musa's monetary capacity, since he was so rich. He was able to dispose of his riches at a moment's notice and in any way he pleased. Although much of his life is shrouded in mystery, one of the most memorable moments of his existence occurred when he visited Cairo while on the Hajj and managed a single handedly crash the gold markets. He did this through purchases as well as blatant generosity. Just imagine this: West Africa ruler arriving in Cairo, Egypt, and handing out gold bars to random people on the streets as if it was nothing. Mansa Musa Mansa Musa unloaded so much gold in Egypt that it sunk the value of this precious metal in the Egyptian economy. And the repercussions lasted over a decade. After Mansa Musa's departure, after all gold is valuable because of its scarcity, so if everyone you know suddenly has a pile of gold in their lap, this rare metal is not worth quite as much anymore. Mali had more gold than anywhere else in the world at the time. And the sudden unloading of largely quantities of it in Egypt kicked off a spate of hyperinflation that put the Egyptian merchants and financial brothers to shame. It was this exploit, more than anything else, that sent shockwaves through the Middle East, across the Mediterranean, and on into Europe. Soon, many heads of state around the world were whispering about the mysterious Mali emperor who had a who had so much gold that he did not quite know what to do with it. But after returning from his Haji, Mansa Musa did make some very wise investments in 1324 while Musa was still abroad during the Haji. His top general, Sagamandi Mandia, had managed the annex two major trading cities, Gao and Timbuktu, to the realm. Mansa Musa used all of the resources at his disposal to make these two West African metropolises stand out as not only centers of immense commercial and trade, but also of learning. He hired top of the line architects to build mosques, schools, and government buildings, some of which still stand today. Subsequent explorers, such as the famed Muslim scholar Ibn Battuta, later visited these sites and marveled at their construction. The Islamic school of Sankore, which would ultimately become the University of Sankore, would draw thousands of dedicated students and boasted a library that housed countless scholastic texts and valuable manuscripts. Mansa Musa not only wanted to enrich his empire with material wealth, but also with a legacy of learning and education. It was these efforts that would leave the most lasting imprint on his empire. Long after the gold was gone and the salt mines may have dried up, these storied centers of knowledge remain fixed in the sands of desert, regions of Gao and Timbuktu, just as they fixed in the sands of time. In all, Mansa Musa ruled the Mali Empire for 25 years, and by all accounts, he was timely beloved by his people. According to the Arab historian Ibn Kathir, he was a dashing, charismatic, and charming figure. Ibn Kathir described Mansa Musa as being a young, handsome man who had 24 kings under his authority. Under Mansa Musa's rule, these subordinate kings would serve as governors for a sprawling empire that took up much of West Africa. And as the Catalan Atlas can attest, the Mali Empire was West Africa. Mansa Musa reigned over a vast empire. He wore a golden crown, carried golden weapons, sat on a grand throne, and held firm to a golden staff. It is really no wonder that he was known as the Golden Emperor. It truly was a golden age of Mali, and by extension, a golden age for the world. Okay, and the next time we read this, we're going to read the forefathers of Mansa Musa, and that's chapter, we'll get on into that in chapter 1. So, thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. Okay, I'm at Mizuklin and Vincent 52. Thank you for being here. And with that said, true love, real peace, and the higher self within the soul. Till next time, peace.